So with no further ado, let's get into the setup. In this first part, I will show you the connectivity, how everything is connected, and I will go deep into that. This is one part of the workflow I have touched in previous videos, but I will go deeper than I did in previous videos. So let's go. I'm going to start to speak about the connections into the system. Now I use the USB for power. It is running into a wall, which has a USB socket. So that's pretty straightforward. It is just USB power into my Novation. Then I used MIDI out 5-pin into my Focusrite 18i8. Now beyond the Impulse 49 going into the MIDI in of the Focusrite 18i8, I have the MIDI out going to my hardware and the USB going to my iPad. I will explain both those methods starting with the iPad. Now my iPad has a USB dongle. This dongle is actually a two-part dongle that allows power and USB to my iPad at the same time. The reason why I want power going to my iPad when making music is because it drains the battery really fast. I like to have longevity in my studio, so the power allows me to infinitely use my iPad in my studio and not worry about running out of batteries, which is awesome. Now you've got some cheaper options like this dongle, which does not have the extra power supply. But again, you are only going to have the USB coming in, and you will be a slave to the battery in time in that sense. If you have this, it will work temporarily or long term if you don't want the power. Me, I love having the power going in for the reasons I explained before. As for the USB, this is coming directly from the Focusrite 18i8, and as you can see, I'm recording audio directly through the USB right now. The USB will send your audio and MIDI to the iPad. And as you can see, actually if I flip over to Korg Gadget, I'm now hitting keys on the Novation Impulse 49, and as you can see, it is recording into my iPad. And I can actually have both the recording program and Korg Gadget going on the same pad at the same time. This is with an iPad Pro though, guys. Might not work as good with something that's not a Pro model. This is one of the benefits of the Pro. Now let's check the MIDI out connections from my Focusrite into my hardware. The red wire here is the wire that is coming from the Focusrite MIDI out into the MIDI in of the Model D. That is the start of my hardware chain. From there, I go MIDI through into my Quadra MIDI through splitter. Now the reason why I don't put this right after the Focusrite is because the Focusrite won't power this, and this is a self-powered MIDI splitter that needs a synthesizer to power it. The Model D powers it fine, and that is the reason why it is after the Model D in my setup. At that point, I have 4 MIDI outs I can split to other hardware synthesizers. So between the USB and the 5-pin MIDI out, I handle audio and MIDI to my iPad and MIDI to my hardware synthesizers. So those 2 wires cover all my bases. And as you can see, the physical hardware inputs into my iPad, which I can layer into the mix in Aria Pro. You can actually physically see the green light blinking now from the microphone input that I showed you recording that I added within this example. Obviously, you can add more than just one mono track. To the right of it, I actually have in the second input is a Behringer synthesizer. This input that the microphone is taking would actually be another Behringer synthesizer if I was recording music. And I have a mixer plugged into the back which can expand my inputs if I run out of space and want more gear into the mix. So that is kind of the general setup I've got going on with my wires, hooking my Novation up into my Focusrite, which links into my iPad, which runs over to my hardware. So now you guys have a general idea of how I hook everything up. I want to go deeper into all the options and parameters that are within the new Korg Gadget MIDI out module or gadget. Korg, in my opinion, has released a well-rounded CC sequencing module that is just what the Korg Gadget ecosystem needed. Now let's jump into all the new options and parameters that Korg Gadget gives you with this new release. The MIDI out gadget has two main options. You have your source and your MIDI channel. On your MIDI output or your source, you decide where your MIDI is going out to. As you can see in this screen, I have various iOS music apps. And if you had an USB interface or an audio interface connected to Gadget or your iPad, it would show up in your sources here. And after that, you have MIDI channels, which obviously gives you your 16 MIDI channels. Between your MIDI out source and MIDI out channel, you have a lot of options over control over hardware and iOS synthesizers. And this is something the Korg Gadget universe has needed for a long time. Jumping into your control section, you have a nice XY, assignable XY pad on your upper left hand corner. Both the X and the Y can be assigned. Beneath the XY pad, you have an ARP with various modes. Next to the keyboard, you have your scale section, like all your other gadgets, so you can choose which scale you want to play in, or if you want to choose no scale at all. Then next to the ARP, you have an LFO. Then you have a settings option on the upper right, which gives you output settings, which is similar to the other options in the previous screen before. And you have some LFO, transpose, and a panic option. Beyond that, you have the option to save and load presets, and this comes packed with presets for many of your Korg favorites. And this is all backed with the power of the Korg Gadget sequencer, where you have the edit, copy, paste, and all the power of almost a typical DAW at your fingertips.